Welcome back, Truth Soldiers. I wanted to share a few things that will further destroy the Big Bang evolution narrative, and it has to do with the early Earth environment that they tell us had to exist for life to be present and evolve in the first place. Because my thoughts on this matter came about when I was doing a lesson for Creation Standard. I was working on the firmamental class. I wasn't even doing our life science class, but I was thinking about the air, of course, and how they say it moves with the spinning globe in all these different directions. And of course, we find out about jet streams moving faster than the world is spinning in the same direction and all those things, and trade winds going all sorts of different directions. We realize that's not true. But my thought was those very first winds to appear on this space rock in a vacuum, how it stuck to it and all those things. And that thought process led me to think about the very first life forms, which they tell us, if you're not familiar with the fake tree of life, this blasphemous creation they've made that has zero evidence to support it after you throw out the fraudulent evidence, which is all of it. But you have their fake tree of life, which doesn't include all the millions of species we have or the missing links for any of the things out here. And so we have a good graphic that goes up in pretty much every science classroom that I've ever been in outside of my own. They have this Tree of Life poster, similar to this Nat Geo poster here, and I believe I've seen this exact one up on some walls. But this type of nonsense, they have us believing that something started right here. What was that something? Well, it's usually cyanobacteria, or a type of cyanobacteria. They would say a less evolved version of that, but it is a photosynthetic organism, meaning it needs carbon dioxide, sunlight, and water. Those three ingredients, that's what plants need. And that's why I had this picture right here. You're probably wondering, why is there a tree in a hole? Well, if plants didn't have the intelligent design features to eat those three ingredients primarily, of course, they need nutrients from the soil. But if they didn't do that, every tree that we know of would be in a pit. It would be eating soil if they were eating dirt. Okay. They're not eating dirt. They are using the nitrogen and the phosphorus from the soil because their genes, DNA, that's part of the ingredients, right? Nitrogen and phosphorus. And so they need that to make more DNA and more cells. That's why they get that out of the soil. But the three primary ingredients right here, making sugar and oxygen. And when you look at these three ingredients, sunlight being one of them, I mean, that blows my mind that plants can use that to make what they make: light, air, and water. Our Father is a masterful designer because no factory in the world can take in these three ingredients and make sugar and oxygen. There's no technology that can do that. And so I say there's no technology. There's no man-made technology. There's our Father's made technology that can do that. And so this stuff that we need, it's not just something that the early Earth should have. And the reason I was thinking that was because the plants need carbon dioxide, right? Dioxide means there's two oxides or two oxygens. And so these cyanobacteria, they would have needed that if they're photosynthetic. It would also need water, which they say there was water there. We'll talk about that later. But they need those things. And so cyanobacteria, what was their purpose? Because we're told they were the original source of oxygen for carbon dioxide on Earth. That's impressive if you think about what we just said. They were the original source for the oxygen that was then turned into carbon dioxide. Think about it. If they need it, they need CO2. How can they take it if they're the ones that are going to make the oxygen that's then going to make the CO2 that they needed before they needed it? It would have had to have been already made by them in the first place. They could not have evolved to exist if carbon dioxide wasn't there. And we're seeing, according to the experts right here, Google, I know Google's not the biggest expert, but when you look into this, cyanobacteria are given credit. This algae, that somehow spawned into existence with no known origin. How that happened, they don't know. But this algae, they say, produced a lot of oxygen, which means it would have needed a lot of carbon dioxide. And it would have had to have had a mechanism far greater than any man-made technology to take these ingredients that didn't exist until they made it to make sugar and oxygen. And so they tell us that these were one of the things at the base of the tree of life. It's hard to see, but there's some cyanobacteria stuff down here below those first two branches that spread out and it goes all over the place. But that is the big deal here because the original source of carbon dioxide for plants, they tell us, was Earth's early atmosphere. How could that be if the carbon dioxide had no dioxide? It would just be carbon. So they say that it happened in many different ways, volcanic eruptions and whatnot. But still, you need the oxygen. Without the oxygen, there's no oxidizer. You can't have sparks and flames and all those things. You're in a vacuum. Kind of like when they were drilling in the moon this past winter, I think it was, and they saw sparks in a vacuum. And then they're like, oh, wait, it was a drill that had a pneumatic drill type of technology that used nitrogen. Yeah, you're still not going to get a spark in a vacuum. So here is some sources I've looked at. The Scientific American right here, the origin of oxygen in Earth's atmosphere. What do they tell us? They tell us that the breathable air we enjoy today originated from tiny organisms. That's the origin of oxygen that would have been needed to make the carbon dioxide these things needed to even exist in the first place. So it says the details remain lost in geologic time. Of course they do. All of their evidence is lost. And it's not just lost, it's not there. Here's the Planetary Society. Let's see what they say. So how did Earth's atmosphere get its oxygen? The simple answer is that early microorganisms produced it using a process you may have learned about in elementary school, photosynthesis. Yeah, we learned about it. No one talked about how that carbon dioxide came into existence without the oxide. So yeah, they try to make it seem very simple and that they know how it happened. So peaceful, yet so indoctrinating and so painful to go back and look at how their narrative destroys itself when you start looking at what these things need, what those ingredients are really all about, and how impossible it would be for them to exist in the first place, even if the world were indeed this rock covered with water, because water would have been really important. You would have needed that. And they say that we have water on this rock that was caused by an explosion that made stars, and well, I guess stars would be suns in their version. Somehow that water didn't put out the sun, even though the sun's gravity is stronger. It skipped the sun and was sent to something with less gravity on little bitty tiny rocks. They had crystals and water droplets inside them, and they just smashed into us, so many of them, that we now have a ball covered with zillions of tons of water. That's how we got our water, they say. That's one theory, anyways. The other theory, this one cracks me up. Some say that Earth was just born with water. Imagine that. Already had the water. Here's what Google told me when it comes to the water's origin. That cracks me up. Says that the planet may have already had the molecular precursor of water when it formed. It just had those ingredients there when it was made. It was born with them. And then here's the asteroid theory. Asteroids and comets that have collided with Earth. There's a special delivery. We need water. They're delivering it constantly, skipping the sun. Otherwise, they would have put out the sun. And it says this was billions of years it took. Of course, may have delivered water to the planet. The original Uber. Chemical markers in the ocean's water suggest that asteroids are the most likely source. Chemical markers in the ocean, yeah, that's it. And these asteroids, which are found in the outer asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, contain water ice. Water ice. When they are heated by radiation or impacted, the ice melts and reacts with minerals to create clays. Some scientists believe that unmelted or chondritic meteorites may have also delivered water to Earth. Thank goodness they were delivering water back in the day, and then they just stopped. Could you imagine Flood of Noah 2.0 if they just kept doing that? Yeah, they quit. They ran out. And so that is what they tell us. And of course, life forming 3.8 billion years ago. We've talked about that before. From that single cell that couldn't have existed in the first place, turned into fish, every single dinosaur we've ever seen, hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of creatures. I mean, just massive creatures, and then they went extinct and turned into birds. But you never see the evolution of plants. They leave that out. Even though these were the precursors to the fish, why don't we see these things growing legs and walking out on land like they have us mutated fish monkey people doing? Well, because people would laugh at that concept. They leave that off of their evolutionary tree of life. They don't show you that algae and how it could have turned into all these things where there's no, absolutely no missing links for. They have a common creator, not a common ancestor. There are tons of different types of trees. You cannot tell me that every single one of these, with all their unique design features for their environment, even oranges here, in a package and pre-sliced with seeds needed to grow another tree, cannot tell me this evolved from algae. Why would it have any desire to turn into something like that from water, sunlight, and air? Can you show me any creation that can take water, sunlight, and air and make this combination of flavors? It's like the mother's body. Like my wife, she just gave birth to our sixth child. Hallelujah. Born healthy and strong. Had some complications, but very healthy, very strong, beautiful little girl. And her mother is a warrior. And the milk that her body is producing is something that also no factory can do. Name a factory that can take the ingredients from any random food that you put at it and turn it into milk. That's what the body's doing. And not just milk. There's like three different kinds of milk that the body makes in a specific order for a specific purpose for the child's development. It's masterfully made and it's so intelligently designed that we can just marvel at it and we cannot recreate it. I think that just is awesome. It shows you what kind of creator we're dealing with, and yet we still limit what he can do in our lives, and we need to quit doing that because he has no limits when it comes to how awesome he can make things, as well as how powerful he can be when he moves. And so we got to remember that. And so I wanted to point those flaws out with the fake tree of life, how it falls apart when you start looking at the early Earth environment. At least that's what they call it. And we know that the early Earth environment was creation. Everything was void. There was no life. Then he made it. Very, very simple. And that's not the only thing when it comes to the foolish wisdom of this world. You have them telling us, mainstream sources, that the Earth is spinning faster. They were predicting this. And that's what blows my mind is that they were claiming to predict that the Earth was going to speed up before it even happened. Imagine looking at a spinning ball and going, a week from now, it's going to speed up. How can you predict that without ignoring the laws of motion that you've already invented? Perpetual motion machines would be able to exist with a spinning ball that can not only spin for billions of years, it can speed up while the other spheres going around it keep doing what they're doing, same amount of time. The water, of course, skipped the moon as well. I think that's sad. Poor moon. Went right around it. But you have the the Earth here. I mean, just imagine. I used to, in my imagination when I was younger, I would think that they had, cameras out there in space filming the Earth, watching it spin and making all these predictions. But they don't. Otherwise, they would just give us the footage that they're using to make these measurements and predictions. They aren't. But they are telling us that the world sped up and that eventually we're probably going to lose a minute of time by, I think, 2029, they said. And what's interesting about this, if you've ever read the Bible, the good words in Matthew from our Messiah, he talks about the days being shortened. And there's two ways to look at this. I know. One of them is the total number of days, cut in half, like, hey, there could be 1,000 days, but we're going to end it right at 500, that type of way. Or the actual literal length of days could be shortened so that the days are passing faster. That's another option there. So you have two options here. I'm not saying that it's literally the sun's moving faster up above us. We know it's not the world spinning faster, but the sun moving faster could happen. Would be really cool to witness that in our lifetimes because we know that those days would be shortened for the elect's sake. That's what the Messiah tells us here. He says, and except those days should be shortened, there should no flesh be saved, but for the elect's sake, those days shall be shortened. And so he is going to wait for the last ones to be saved. But again, those days will be shortened. And it's something that gets me excited when I see these days are most likely speeding up. It feels like they are. I feel like I'm just waking up and then going back to sleep so fast. And I know I'm not the only one that feels that way. That's not the only thing they're telling us. I want to keep pointing out some of the bogus stuff. They're now saying that our tilt has shifted 31.5 inches. That imaginary pole that's been holding this globe in place in spite of, trillions of tons of water being moved to and fro, that big bulge of water moved up and down by the moon every year. That doesn't do it, but it's now tilting and changing, shifting. But that stuff is something that they could not predict, just like the early Earth stuff. They can try to make up bogus stories, but put them to the test. They will fall apart. The more you dig, the more you look, the origins of life stuff just falls apart. And Dr. James Tour, he does a good job making those people terrified with his words because he really does break it down from the molecular level. And I'd like to highlight some of his stuff or even have him come on as like a guest speaker because he is phenomenal at what he does. Very, very straightforward. He doesn't hold back. And he's very brilliant, one of the most brilliant minds in that realm when it comes to origins of life. And so this stuff is fascinating to me, and I love watching the foolish wisdom fall apart. And that's what we're going to be doing this year, even more with Creation Standard. Our classes start September 2nd. Make sure you've registered if you're wanting to come back. If you want to go and check that out, and you're not someone who believes in biblical cosmology, you can still do our life science classes. Those are fun. Or you can go through the earth science classes and see what happens. We've had people flip their beliefs during that experience. We've had married couples where one believes, one doesn't, go through it together, put it to the test, and by the time they come out, they're both unified. And we don't care if you, by the end of it, you are like, hey, you know what? We tried, we put it to the test, we don't see what you're seeing. That's okay. We all have different paths, but at least you're putting it to the test. And so that's what we're doing with this journey. If you want any information, you can send us an email, thecreationstandard@gmail.com. And so that is a huge thing right around the corner. We are a month away from that experience if you're watching this after we upload it. So September 2nd, that's the big day. My brother also offering some classes, biblical history and math to the mix. Foundation Standard. If you haven't looked into that, you need to go to the website, check it out. Give him some support. He is like I was last year and like I am this year as well, stepping away from that paycheck. So we have a lot of free and reduced price students, and numbers seem to be down. I could be wrong. They may spike when people start registering here this month. We don't know, but we need some support. So if you feel led to support, go and support my brother, Foundation Standard. His is different than mine. If you want to send it to him, make sure you send it directly to him using the information on the website. You can go to the top here, click more, support us. You can see what your support goes to. You can support an entire family for a year or more. You can become one of our sponsors that has your logo, company logo, or name at the bottom of our homepage or on our social media. We can share your company's information on our social media. But here's some ways to support. If you want to support my brother, Michael, right here on the right, Foundation Standard, or Creation Standard if you want to support us. And so it's both. You don't have to pick one. You could do both if you want, but definitely in need of support. It has been a major blessing to so many, including myself. A lot of the information that we give in our videos now is based on what we're finding with this learning journey. And so it's been powerful to me. And in addition to that, I want to give one last update. It has to do with my little girl. I told you she was born. A lot of you guys have prayed for us, and we are thankful. But she was born. It was a C-section. My wife had to endure. Sadly, she was trying to avoid that, and it just didn't happen. And so she had to have a C-section. And what a soldier she has been, as well as my little daughter here with her head full of hair. She is just growing and changing before our very eyes. But I wanted to give some words of support to anyone out there, mothers who have endured this type of delivery or just any type of delivery, they can be very intense. I started thinking about them as I'm reflecting back to my childhood. My mother, when I was about 6, gave birth to my sister, and it was a C-section and a very rough delivery process. And it scarred me seeing the look on her face, how tired she was. It was like she had almost died and just was brought back barely. And it took her a while to recover. Her voice was gone. It was just extremely sad to see my mother like that. And now, as a husband, my wife that I love, seeing her go through that, it's tough. But women are soldiers, and they were designed to be that way, to be mentally tough. And I'm not taking away credit from soldiers. The sacrifices they make is more than what I could do and more than I have done. And so the things that I've done to share truth, yeah, it seems like a sacrifice, but I'm not stepping away from my family and going to another country. That is something admirable. My dad did that. He's a veteran. My stepmother did that. She's a veteran. My grandfather, so I respect veterans, but I just decided to look into the statistics to see what women go through because I don't think they get enough credit for the miracle of life and their contribution to it. But I went back to the statistics and saw that in 2023, 260,000 women died during or following pregnancy and childbirth worldwide. 260,000. Then I looked up how many soldiers lost their lives that year. 20,149. And so I just feel that women deserve a lot more respect for what they go through and they need to be given the credit that's due. I know that we sometimes think, well, they were designed to do that and no big deal, but they really do endure a lot and their bodies go through so much with these changes. And I know that you guys have been praying for us, my wife in particular. I thank you for that. She has also thanked you guys for that. It's something that she has needed and it's been a major blessing. So thank you guys for all of your support and praying for us along the way because we have needed it. And fear likes to set in, especially in those moments where things seem to be going south. And I know that our Father will provide and take care of things. But again, your prayers were needed and felt. So we thank you for that. So I hope this update provides some clarity on where we are now, what to expect around the corner, and also gives you some ammunition to use when people are talking about the early earth and the origins of life. You now have something that helps all of that fall apart because we know our Father's intelligent design baffles mankind. We cannot recreate it and do the things that it does. And so I hope that was a blessing to you guys, seeing this little science lesson. Many more to come, but we love you and the Father loves you. We'll be back with more updates as soon as we can. I just have a lot of work to do. I'm trying to finish our second book. I was hoping to do 4 before the end of summer, and I'm just now finishing up with the second one. So our 2 life science books will be the ones I'm working on after we get started, but I will try to have those done. And so we love you guys. Thank you again for all that you do. We will see you guys next time.